Iridia is a smart granular reverb that lets you create any type of reverberation. Although it's a very powerful tool, its interface might seem a little odd, at least when compared to other reverbs you might be using. So today I'm gonna break it down how it works and guide you through some practical demonstrations so that by the end of this video you'll also be able to create some next level reverbs that sound just like this. So let's dive in. This is Iridia, and note that you can resize it if it's taking too much of your screen space. Iridia is a convolution reverb, meaning that it uses audio recordings with actual echoes and reflections of real locations, such as hall, church, or a small studio, to digitally recreate those environments and combine them with your sound. This is what's called impulse response technology, and it's how Iridia creates reverberation, except that it doesn't load up any recorded impulse responses right away to digitally recreate a space, and because of that is not able to do anything right away. So how does this reverb work? Well, you could load and use the samples included in our plugin presets, which you can find right here, but one of the aspects that make Iridia so unique is that it can take any samples and create exclusive impulse responses out of them, including your own. So it allows you to upload any samples, sounds, or recordings you might want to use, creating an exclusive impulse response library which the plugin will then use to create reverberation. So technically, you can come up with any type of reverb you can imagine, because the samples you upload will essentially translate to the properties of the reverb. But I'll show you what that means in the next section. For example, let's take a listen to this evolving drone that I got in this project, and then let's explore how uploading different samples into Iridia will lead to completely different outcomes. So here's the drone sound. Now let's try two different approaches. First, I'll upload bright samples and then play it back without tweaking the plugin. And then I'll do the same but using deep or darker sounds. We're not gonna make any tweaks to the plugin, the only difference will be the samples we upload. So let's see what happens. So first thing, I'm just opening Iridia, and now I'll need to load samples because remember, the plugin doesn't load up anything right away, so it can't do any reverb. I like to think of this as an empty box. You need to put something into it so it can create reverb. So I already have the samples, I'll just hit load, and I'm gonna upload all these bright sounds I got here. So they're uploaded, and these are the sounds we'll be using for the reverb. And now using the default settings, here is the reverb. There's this high-pitched sound that actually looks more like a synth than a reverb. Let's hear the dark samples now, and then let's compare it. So I'll just need to clear the samples, and I'm gonna load the dark samples, which I also got here. And here's how they sound. So again, same settings, I just changed the samples. Let's have a listen. So for me, when we used the dark samples, there were a lot of resonant sounds in the lower, maybe lower mid frequencies. And one way of thinking about what just happened is understanding that convolution is the multiplication of frequencies in both the input sounds and the impulse responses. When we used Iridia with the dark samples, the lower frequencies were the ones that resonated, and we kind of had a muddy sound. So both outcomes were very different, and we are just getting started. Before I jump into the most interesting feature in this plugin, let's cover the basic parameters in the interface so you can understand how to tweak your reverb decay, width or size, plus other parameters that feel similar to how you would tweak your average reverb. So the processing controls can be found on the right side of the interface, and these determine how impulse response grains are selected, combined and convolved with the incoming audio signal. Meaning that after you upload samples, here's how you'll shape how they come together as reverberation. These are the impulse controls, which provide detailed control over grain and impulse response behavior, where separation controls the distance between grains, Size adjusts grain length, and pitch transposes the output by up to plus or minus 1 octave. So if you think about grains as segments of the uploaded samples being used as the reverb, increasing separation in size will result in smoother and more spacious sounds, because technically every sample will be longer, while lowering their value will cause it to sound more like a glitchy or granular sound. Each of these parameters also has a variance modifier built in, which introduces randomness within the selected range. Then the window parameter works almost as a soft filter used to avoid distortion when transitioning between individual grains. Then reverse just controls how frequently grain or samples are played in reverse, from never to always. Next, you'll find the space controls, which shape the perceived spatial characteristics of the convolution/reverb. These are easier to understand because they're similar to what you would expect from the average reverb. Decay shapes how the reverb fades over time, tail adds an extended reverb fall-off to the impulse response, and width adjusts the stereo spread, ranging from mono to wide stereo. We also have a dry-wet output control right here, but these require no further explanation, I believe. Now these are the basics, but before I cover anything else, let's have a look at this awesome feature sitting right at the center of the plugin. I like to call this our canvas because you can actually draw here to interact with the plugin in real time. Like, how cool is this? But what does it actually mean, and how does it relate to the reverb being created? The audio plot is the central area of exploration in Iridia, and it's where your audio samples are visualized based on the features you've selected. So after loading your audio files in the sample selection, you'll need to press the plot button, and this will happen. The plugin will use AI to analyze your sounds and learn to organize its grains into continuous clusters, which get grouped based on similarities determined by the AI analysis. Meaning that every color and every region in your canvas is essentially an uploaded sample that's been broken down into individual grains, and is sitting next to others with similar characteristics. Which properties of the sound are taken into account for the analysis, and how the plugin determines which sounds relate to each other is based on the parameters you select in the analysis section, which you'll find here. This is also where you'll decide how the samples land in your canvas, because analyzing different parameters will result in unique sonic relations. For example, if I select loudness as the only parameter for the analysis, loud samples will get grouped together, while selecting brightness and richness will likely group bright and dark sounds together in contrasting regions. So this is all very advanced stuff, but it's exactly what makes Iridia so interesting to use. And now that you understand what the canvas is actually showing you, it's time to interact with it to shape what the reverb will sound like. So Iridia offers two interaction modes for constructing impulse responses: path and region mode. Path mode is my favorite, and it's what allows you to draw a specific path through the canvas. Then during playback, impulse response grains are selected along this path. So we're essentially drawing between different samples, which, remember, they will be grouped in the canvas based on similarities. So by drawing around, you'll essentially be connecting grains that are similar and creating reverberation based off their properties and the transition between them over time. Then there's also region mode, and it lets you select a circular area within the plot. It's not as interactive as the previous mode, but grains within the region you drew will then be chosen randomly, creating more diffuse and textural impulse responses rather than evolving textures. Because remember, by drawing a path, we are connecting grains that are similar, so this makes for an evolving reverb. It's also worth a mention that you can switch between live and baked modes. The difference is that in live mode, the impulse response is dynamically generated in real time, while baked mode renders a single impulse response ahead of time by stitching together all grains along the selected path or region. So live is essentially processing in real time, while baked, it's already done for you before you hit play. Lastly, there's also an automation window that allows you to draw time position-based curves that influence how the impulse response behaves during playback. In the amplitude graphic, you can control volume over time. Frequency automates pitch transposition during convolution, while position controls how playback moves through the impulse response path. It also includes a 2-band EQ for filtering the spectrum, which consists of a low shelf and high shelf, and either transitions into a low pass or high pass filter when gain is reduced to its minimum value. There's a lot to explore here, so let's jump into a practical demonstration. Here's an experimental composition at a very early stage, and as you'll hear, some synths are very dry and right at your face. So because I want this to sound more spacious and ambient, let's try using Iridia on a send bus to apply it to all these synths. So let me play the synths and you'll understand what I mean. So as you're able to hear, it's very dry. Let's add some reverb. I've got the reverb set up here on the bus and I'm just gonna add Iridia to it. As you already know, we need to upload some samples, and here I'm gonna use a preset. So all I need to do is browse here and then choose one from the factory presets. And these are the samples that we have on the preset. They're these metallic sounds, and I think it will work great on this experimental composition because the synths are very glitchy, they have a lot of high frequencies, so I think this will work well together. So the plot is already made and we can hit play and kind of experiment with the drawing, so we can try and come up with something we like and that fits the sounds. I'm gonna do this 100% wet and no dry signal because we are on the bus. And yeah, let's hit play and then let's see how it goes. So you can see that every region has like a different sonic signature, and that's awesome. It's because the samples, as I've already mentioned, they've been analyzed and kind of separated based on how they sound. Now I want this to be ambient, so I need to increase the separation so it's smoother, and also the size. Then I'm gonna adjust the window so it becomes smoother as well. And then I'm just gonna increase the decay all the way up, and let's have a listen. So I think that's very interesting. Now let's compare it. So that's it for today. I hope this provided you some useful information about our plugin and it was easy to follow along. Iridia definitely offers a creative and interactive way to add space and depth to your projects, which is like nothing you would expect from a reverb. So if you don't already own this plugin, then you can check it out using the link in the description, and there's a free demo. Consider subscribing so you don't miss anything that we're working on, and if you like this video, as always, don't forget to leave your like and let me know your thoughts on a plugin down in the comments. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one, which you can watch right here.